Internet, and welcome to another episode of My Cool Friends. We go live every Friday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If this is your first time joining us, then first must I say hello. It's fantastic to have you here. All of our previous episodes can be found at the YouTube channel, and we're also on the Twitter and the Facebooks. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the midst of relaunching our fabulous YouTube challenge. If you are someone who is in the midst of struggling how to learn all of this very trying and wondrous technology, first of all, you're not the only one. I deal with this every day. It's very, very stressful. I encourage you to come and join our challenge. We're going to be covering things like SEO, designing your videos, editing your videos, and making sure that you are the dominating force of your YouTube channel, just like we have right here. Today, ladies and gentlemen, that giggling voice that you hear in the background is our very, very special guest today. She is a heart-centered entrepreneur creating her own agency that is moving and grooving and growing, known as Holistics Growth Strategies. She is the mind behind helping people find their passion, find their purpose, and helping them craft a business around this. Please, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome, with homemade sound effects, Miss Amber Mirza.
Why, thank you. What amazingly spectacular homegrown sound effects. I can honestly say I've never been welcomed on a show with such amazing homegrown sound effects. Congratulations, man.
Why, thank you. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
Mirza, just the way it's spelled.
All right. I'm 1 point for Gryffindor. Amber, it is a pleasure to see you once again. It's been a long time since I've gotten to just sit down and chat with you. How has everything been since I last saw you?
Oh my gosh. You know, we were just talking about that events are not happening the way they were. The conferences, the seminars, the get-togethers. Mm-hmm. It's been a little bit of a different world, I confess. So while I'm used to seeing you more in person from time to time, the seeing you virtually is perhaps not quite like the same, but it's pretty amazing.
It is, as we take all of these tools that we've had at our disposal and create all these amazing things that we have. And I think that's a perfect segue into our first question here. We discussed a bit in the pre-show behind the curtains where the internet cannot see us. Oof. I forgot to mute my microphone. Now the entire internet heard that. That you are centering your business around helping people greatly find their that they not only can start a business, but they can start a business around their purpose. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Can you give us a little bit more inside information, if you could?
Not just for you, Ben, of course. Okay. So actually, before I forget, congratulations. I heard you talk about your challenge and how you were staying true to that accountability commitment that you had. So I'm like, oh, good for you. Go, Ben.
Oh, thank you.
There's so many times when we're like, yeah, I'm going to do that. But it takes that extra little something to stay true to what you commit to and then take the steps. When you do it publicly and you follow it up with that first step, oh my gosh, it made me so happy to hear that. I'm like, I got to say it to Ben. Awesome. I'm so glad to see this. So congratulations.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. For those of you that are listening and what's she talking about? I did a live, basically publicly declaring I have been held accountable by fantastic friends to make this happen that have loved and supported me. And now this challenge that I've been telling you guys about is coming to fruition and has grown too because of that. So thank you. Thank you, golf clap.
So now in terms of the question that you asked me, yes, it's It was the funniest. Well, okay, I say funniest because, it's the kind of thing that makes you go, what in the world, But then as you're looking back, you're thinking, but of course. And my background is so heavily into business strategy and marketing and finance, right? So it was always, I was talking about foundations and how you need to have the right foundations to start a business. How do you launch a business properly? How do you grow a business? What direction are you going? Like strategies before tactics, all that good stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was around last year, towards the end of it, that I was hearing so much about people missing that energy that just revives you and makes you stay strong no matter what's hitting you, right? Even when the lows hit, you are able to rise up and then you're able to go. But it was that contracted feeling that no matter, I was talking to somebody who had a spectacular year, somebody who was just trying to figure out how to pivot and how to change and how to do things that, were able to go in the direction they wanted, but things weren't clicking quite yet, right? It didn't matter who I was talking to. I kept on getting this feeling that people were at this like low point, and I'm like, I don't want to end this year anywhere but just super high. Like, I'm going to be right there, bring it on, baby, because things are not going to change at the stroke of midnight magically. The next day is going to dawn. And if you don't know how to feel just super connected, knowing where you're headed, knowing why you're headed there and who you're headed with, how are you going to make it through? And no matter even the success that you have, is it really going to drive you? And is it going to inspire those around you who maybe need a little bit more of a lift, right? So it was around that time that, as I was thinking, well, okay, what is it that's missing? It brought me to that whole idea of fulfillment and purpose and calling, words that we think about when we are in a philosophical mood, or maybe, just kind of thinking, hey, I'm kind of feeling deep here. But joking aside, it's that thing that gives you that little extra oomph that you need just to ride out anything, or ride really high when you're celebrating something, right? And I'm like, okay, so I hadn't talked to anybody about it because these are just things, when you just try different things as you're going through different levels in your life and your business, you're trying to make things work. When things are working really well, you're like, okay, I want some more of that. How do I can make it continue?
I got thoughts and I got stories. Like, do you want me to chime in with them, or do you want to keep, you want to hold the talking baton?
Well, you know what? That's the cool thing with us cool friends, that we can always chime in and amplify it. But it's literally that thought, that what is missing? How do I make it so that I can share what was working for me? And it was the weirdest thing for me because I'm like, I've never talked to anybody before, but these are some of the things I've tried. So what if I share this with my friends? And it started with sharing it with my friends to kind of just sharing it with my clients. And it just ballooned from there, right?
Right. I'm seizing the talking baton while you take your drink for the audio listeners. Like, for me personally, I have been in that situation, and I even made a YouTube video on this as well when I was in that situation, where we all go through, like, we're humans, so of course we change and we grow, like, as people, and so naturally it's logical to assume that our businesses will also change and grow. And I remember finding myself in that situation of, like, I hate my business and I don't want to get up in the morning. And like Russell, like we're both familiar with Russell and ClickFunnels. Russell also tells this story of, like, it's almost like I've molded my own prison cell. And when you're in that situation, you have a couple of choices. The most logical of them is like, oh, hey, just toss all this to the side and go do something that actually, like, fills your cup. and why is it that we don't actually like? Why is it that most people don't just do that? Because we are not logical creatures. We are emotional creatures. And so we view that situation with an emotional lens. And the emotional lens is that if we just simply shift and go towards something that would fill our cup more, that also we're also simultaneously saying to our emotional brain that we are leaving behind all the time and progress that we put into what we were currently doing. And then it says then that's puts you in a paradox of like we're almost staying in our prison cell to justify the time that we spent building it.
And there's also the thought, there's this myth out there that says, hey, if you're talking about idealistic concepts like fulfillment and purpose and alignment, then you're automatically sacrificing revenue and profitability because those only come at the cost of, pursuing this path. Like, what are you talking about? Of course, business doesn't work that way. And have you heard that the only responsibility, the sole responsibility, the primary responsibility of business is to its shareholders? The only reason the business exists is to make money. How many times have you heard that?
It's been I feel like it's been a long time since I've heard that, mainly because I don't hang out with those kinds of people anymore. I also would say the same thing to the first comment that you had of like, oh yeah, like only like you can't have like the creative freedom and the financial freedom at the same time. Like I know exactly where that comes from, and I feel like I haven't heard that mentality in a long time.
Well, I assure you, it still very much exists in most quote unquote normal business circles. Like when you're talking to entrepreneurs, small business owners, or large. Sometimes I'm talking to people who have been in business for a really long time. They're making really good money. They are scaling and they're growing, but the focus is on that short-term share price, right? And what is my quarter saying to me? What are my shareholders going to feel? What are my investors talking about? I gotta move in that direction. And believe it or not, I think it says a lot about the people that you hang around with. And that's my circle as well. But that's, believe it or not, still not everywhere, which is why it's my mission to kind of say, let's spread it around more so that thinking changes.
Yeah, I remember that there was a conversation we had on Clubhouse one time that someone shared a conversation that they had with one of those business people that you're talking about, and the conversation went a little bit like, oh hey, like have you heard of Clubhouse? It's amazing. Like I don't have time for any of this internet stuff. I'm over here in the real world. And then it started this conversation of like, what exactly is the real world? Because then it's every single person's lens of what exactly that term means. You're shaking your head. I'm passing the talking baton back over to you.
No, I'm agreeing with you because, the funny thing that I learned over the last while is that, or I should say the last long while, because when do you ever stop learning? But it is the perception that we have of what the real world means to us or what our standard way of doing something is. That's exactly what it is. It's our perception. It's our way of doing something, but it doesn't mean that that's the absolute truth and the only way to do things. Baton over.
Yeah, baton back over to me. Absolutely. And so with this, I want to like go into examples, per se. So let's say that you were to like, because I think it's easy to as we're talking like, oh hey, like we hang out with people who do this all the time. It's easy for us to see like what, like of course you can like have your cake and eat it too. But I want to like, so you are the like expert of sitting down and helping people develop their passion business. So what is sort of like the process that you would go through with, let's say, for example, you're sitting down with one of these people who like is always focused on shareholder, almost a shareholder mentality. Let's call it that. What is the process that you might walk them through in your agency?
So let's first make something a little bit more clear. So I do believe that the people, I don't work with just anybody. I work with people who, even if they don't know how to do it, they're actually interested in the concept of having something that aligns with them and reflects their values, right? So somebody who's absolutely hardcore focused on revenue and profit to the exclusion of anything else, including their own team, I'm like, great, awesome. I'll introduce you to somebody else who will help you. But I want to help people who genuinely are curious about it, who are like, hey, you know what? That sounds really good. Are you sure I can actually keep my business afloat, have my obligations to my team, my family, all the people I love still met, and do this thing too? Those are the people I love to talk to, because I'm like, hey, we gotta talk, because you're going to actually see your business shine in a way, both revenue and profit wise and fulfillment wise, like you have never thought of or conceived. Just because in my experience, in my own business, in my own life, whenever I've put people first, whenever I've focused where genuinely the focus should lie, everything else just flows so much better. And how can a company help but be more profitable when you are serving in a way that makes the people connected to your business, whether they're your own team, whether they're your suppliers, whether they're your customers or investors and shareholders, when they see you show up in a way that just, oh my gosh, like so powerfully, it just makes everything more connected. They want to give you more business. They want to do better terms with you. It just flows all the way happily to your bottom line.
I love how you said that in like a people focused way, because like we call back to what we said before, like so much of like, oh, the events we used to go to are gone. I haven't seen you in so long, and we're being able to connect here. Like so much of that, like humans are social creatures, and so we're craving that connection that can't just be serialized. And so when you have like, oh yeah, we want to actually build this genuine connection with this person that we want to get a result for, that's where that magic happens. That's where those genuine relationships come in. And people have actually asked me like, oh Ben, how'd you create a relationship with like X, Y, and Z? Like unconditional love.
100%. So when you ask me what that conversation looks like, the funny thing is I actually figured out what that process, that framework around it was around December of last year, when people were saying to me, you're crazy. Nobody launches anything around Christmas. People just don't do anything. And frankly speaking, if a client had shown up with money in hand and said, here, can you run a campaign for me? Can you set things up? I would have been like, no, I can't take your money. This is around Christmas. No way. There's not even enough time for a warm-up period. Forget about launching anything, right? And here I was. I couldn't let it go, man. I was like, okay, I got to do this. I couldn't think of another name. The only thing that came to me in that moment was recharge. I wanted to recharge my batteries. And that's what I called it. I called it recharge. And I ran with it. And the whole idea was, let's get together and figure out what are the values that you want your business to reflect, because it's not just your business, it's your life. When you are authentic and genuine and you're showing up in a way that says, hey, this is who I am, no pretense, no masks. This is who I am. And the business is such a big part of my life because it fuels all areas of my life. I wanted to reflect the values that are important to me, the values that are going to attract and bind together the team to my organization. And together we're going to work towards this goal that is going to be out in the world as our expression of that love that you just mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, it's like, okay, let's start with the basics. So it was just literally an experiment going, okay, this is what I've done with myself, but let me share it with you. I have no flipping idea how people even signed up for it, but the couple of hours that it was actually up, it was no ad spend, nothing, literally a post on my Facebook profile.
Wow.
But it was the coolest thing because from there we just went with, okay, let's talk about what do you identify as these things? What is that North Star that you want to really pick, right? Your big direction, your big anchor that's going to pull you forward. What is that? But let's start with a series of exercises to identify what's actually important to you. What do you want to reflect? And then what is it that, is going to bind the rest of the people who hear about this to you, attract your tribe. So now you're not getting, even as clients and customers, I mean, I prefer to think, I know that there's a fiduciary duty involved in it, but to me, anytime you have somebody interacting with your business and they're trusting you to buy from you, there is a duty of care that goes with it. So to me, there are no customers in my world, they're my clients, right? So, and that's what I'm talking about. Let's take it one step at a time and figure out your values, right? What do each of the roles in your organization, what are they going to identify with? How do you make it so every single person knows what that big goal is and they buy into and invest in your mission? That's what I'm talking about.
Wow. First of all, I need to give you a golf clap now.
Thank you.
Because I love how, like, I didn't, by the way, like, nothing was planned before this podcast. This is not orchestrated at all, magic audience. But when we started off this show, you congratulated me for doing my spontaneous live for my challenge. And now you're telling me this story of, like, you doing the same thing at a time of year that you had every excuse not to do it. And it still worked. And I think that, speaking from my own, like, experience and point of views and all that, I think that, again, logically, it makes perfect sense. Like, oh, hey, you have an audience, you have a self-driven mission to get your service out to the people who need it. There's no better way than to call it in front of the entire internet and say, like, hey, this is how I'm going to be helping people. And I think that a lot of people know that, but what halts them is like, oh, but what if I fail? But what if the trolls? But what if, like, I put this public video out on the internet? It's almost like a feeling of nakedness in front of the entire internet. And to that, I say, like, the more people that are opposing you, that's a sign of growth. That a lot of times, like, that's a sign that, like, it's working. I have people that are following me. Thoughts, comments, emotional outbursts.
It's so true, Ben, because for me it was genuinely okay, this goes against everything, in terms of business wisdom. When do you launch things? When do you actually propose, right? And the other side, 100%, there was the thing that, okay, I'm so much into the strategy world, right? I design things and I then pick the right tactics, just like little gems to fit into that strategy, right? Now I'm going to be talking about something that's a little bit high level, right? And then, okay, there's the funniest thing. You're going to get a kick out of it.
So tell me.
So, when you kind of figure stuff out and you're going along and you get this thing that you came up with it, right? And you give yourself a little pat on the back and you're like, wow, this is so cool. I totally came up with it. And then you go more and you dive more into it because it's not just working for you, it's also working for your clients. Because the strategy and all of the business stuff, I already know that works, right? Because how long have I been doing it? How long, like even my education, like from education to practice to everything, that stuff I can do. Like, okay, it sounds weird, but I can do that in my sleep, right? But this stuff I thought was just my little private world, right? And then once I have my clients, I can talk to them and I can say that, but it's never broadcasted onto any platform that, have. And we'll come to that platform thing. Remind me to talk about that platform because you were on that journey with me. So you'll definitely enjoy that. So as I was diving deeper into it, going, oh, it's working, but they're really liking this. And this is like, oh, wow, cool. Then I discovered that I'm not this little, amazing spark that came up with it. It's actually a thing. So I launched more into it and I called and, Vicky and I were talking and I said, Vicky, and she's like, you need to do something that you kind of keep under wraps, right? You don't talk about it, but other than to friends and, to clients, and who are already in your world, you don't actually talk about it to anybody else. But you need to own this. You need to have this idea. And one of my clients had given me the title holistic business strategist. That's totally not my coming. But Vicky's like, okay, you need to own that holistic thing. It's not just a thing. And I'm like, Vicky, I want to talk about something that's business, that's conscious, right? And she's like, conscious business. So that's literally where it kind of came up with. So, and as I was diving deeper into it, Ben, there are people like, oh my gosh. Okay, so Whole Foods, already a company that works under that premise, right? When Richard Branson talks about things, I hear conscious business there. When Peter Diamandis talks about things, I hear conscious business there, right? John Mackey, oh my gosh, John Kaufman, like all these greats. And I'm like, oh, it's a world that opened up, right? So more and more and more of that.
See what the more you share, I think about that. In my own journeys, I've gone through this like process of perfectionism that kills, where it's less of a question of like, oh man, does my thing work for people? It's less of that question of does my thing work for people, because I know my thing works for people. I can find plenty of information on the mighty internet that's in my bucket of does my thing work for people. It's more of a question of I'm so engraved in my thing that I see all the flaws. I see all the like, oh man, the website's not correct. Oh man, these pixels are not correct. This color psychology is not correct. This editing in every single pixel in the editing of this YouTube video is not correct. And let me tell you, that's a psychological prison. Then you never end up launching. It's like, Ben, what did you do this year? I don't know. I just don't know what happened this week. You're nodding your head again. Does this sound familiar?
Who does it not sound familiar to? So maybe this is just me projecting, but to me, people who pursue and jump into this world of business, they're wired a little bit differently, right? Because it takes a special human being, and by no means am I saying that this is the only sexy place to be.
Oh, trust me, I am special in every single meaning of the vocabulary word.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like, because sometimes when we're on our little planet, we're like, oh, this is the coolest place to be. And you know what? The truth is that it's the coolest place to be for people who are wired a certain way. But if you have a job where you absolutely feel like you're connected and this is your purpose, you are able to serve, it is no less sexy to be there and absolutely flipping rocking it, right? But in this particular world, there is so much uncertainty in the business world, right? There are times when you are the only thing you know of is the very next step in front of you. And sometimes not even that. You're kind of like, okay, that seems like the very guesstimate wise. I think I'm going to just step there and hope there's something to hold me up.
Right.
But it takes a special personality to be okay with that, and not just be okay with that, thrive in that, right? So when I'm looking at this world that takes courage and conviction and really a tie to your purpose, why would we not own that and reflect that through our business and not be hung up on just the revenue piece of it? Because believe me, I am testament to this. The revenue and the profits will come even more powerfully than you imagine if you just hang on to your purpose and go for that wild ride and not worry about that perfection piece as much.
Oh, what pain are you talking about? No, I think what you're describing, I had like several conversations about this last year. Because that thing that happened.
Yes,
that thing that happened last year. That there's so much uncertainty when we're building these businesses and growing them. That's like, oh man, that's like, I never know what's around the next corner. Like maybe I should just go back to like being one of those guys that pushes papers and just has a regular job. But hey, those are just as uncertain as we have clear evidence of now. So what, and like there's been famous quotes of this in many variations, but like it's all going to be hard. It's just different flavors of hard. You get to pick whichever one you like the most. And I'm choosing the path that we all are choosing the path that like gets us to whatever is going to be most fruitful in terms of emotionally filling our cup, financially filling our cup. Talking baton back over to you.
So it's interesting, you talked about uncertainty spread around, even in professions where there's a lot more security per se, usually, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, I don't believe that one is sexier than the other, right? Because I know personally, like my own brother, you put him in what I do, he'd be miserable. He would be miserable. And yet he absolutely just shines like a beacon in where he is, and he actually is one of the human beings that I'm most proud of. Like, so there isn't one more sexy or more fulfilling or more connected than other. It's where you really are feeling like, hey, this is my round peg or my square hole or whatever the heck it is. You go rock it, and don't let anybody tell you that, hey, no, you're doing wrong, this is better. No, only if it feels for you that it's better, then you go do it. But no, I felt that uncertainty everywhere. And it was really, here's the thing, even in things that are really seemingly hard, you can find areas and pockets of fun and lightness. And if you choose to see it, it will infuse it, and it will make it easier for you to find that space around you, right? That brings creativity, that allows you to show up and say, I see that light in the end of the tunnel. Even when everybody else says, it's a train, run for your life.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. It's going to hit you. Go. And you're like, no. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. That's where I'm headed. But you need that space for you to breathe and to be creative with, right? Because otherwise all that weight down, like this life is so hard, like I don't believe it. I've lived it. But I also found that when you allow yourself to see the lightness in even the hard things, life becomes a lot simpler.
It's almost like you're describing that we are accountable for our own emotions and how we see things in the world, and it's our perception that is the true difference in these sort of situations.
It is. And, I by no means am I saying that some days aren't heavier than others. They
No,
by
not
for
at all.
sure are, right? As I was sharing with you in the pre-conversation, the last year and a bit has been a journey of growth because my dad was diagnosed with a growth in his brain. And just with everything associated and by the way, arranging care in the world that we were just talking about.
That 2020 year.
Was a whole new level of fun. But it's some days, it was because for me people are important, right? My whole life it's people I love. It's not just my family, it's not just my friends, it's sometimes people I don't even know and I've just met, right? But when you show up as being able to see people and appreciate them, you cannot help but love people, right? So, and here is somebody who just even by relationship, by default, I love. He's my dad, right? And as I was going through the emotional ups and downs and everything, and I was trying to figure out, okay, well, all this stuff is happening with my business. I'm trying to figure out what the heck to do for me, for my clients. What am I doing, right? This is how I know God's got a sense of humor, right? It's like, you think you're busy? How about this? Let's just introduce this in there. How's that for a mix? And I'm like, okay, what do I do now? Like, I can't say, hey, Dad, this is so not a convenient time. Can you just hold off?
Could you put this back in the bottle for like 5 minutes?
Let's put a pin in it, okay? A little bit later. But no, you can't do that. So life is real. It shows up. And then it's up to you to show up too, right? But how you show up is up to you. And that's when I had to, like, I kind of joke around that I've never really grown up, and it's true. But there is a level of growing up.
I don't know what you're talking about.
See, you get that. But this is where I'm like, okay, how do I do this? How do I shift the priority? Because really, if we look at what a priority really is, it's not the definition that we've given it. It's not priorities. There is one priority and everything else kind of just fits around that, right? So he by default was the priority. And I'm like, okay, well, what about my work and my clients? And because I love my clients, like I don't believe there's anybody else who can love my clients the way I do, because I just absolutely love them. But I'm like, okay, now my integrity is tied to how I deliver and fulfill the promise that I made to these people, but I can't also not, be there for my dad and everything else that's going on.
So how do
I do this?
How do you handle that balance when, you have your promise and your word to keep, but, life just comes a knocking with a baseball bat that's made of steel iron?
It actually felt that way. So that's when, that whole thing about, okay, the days are feeling really heavy. I don't seem to have enough time in the day. And I don't know, because if you know anything about healthcare, most of that stuff happens during the daytime, right around the time when your clients also want to talk to you, all that fun stuff.
If you know anything about healthcare, it's the most inconvenient thing in the world.
It's like, what do you mean you don't work evenings and weekends? But it was just, okay, so this is where the strength of relationships and people come up, right? When you have been there for your people, when it's those times and you don't pretend. Like, one thing is consistent in my life: I do not pretend. I do not try to be someone that, who's like, hey, I have all the answers. So
I am God. I have all the wisdom in the world.
I am very much like, hey, look, I don't know this, but I will figure it out. Resourcefulness, I have no problem with. But because I show up honestly and authentically, and they know my heart. I know that I am invested in their success, right? So it was like being real and saying, okay, my dad and his care needs to be, if the hospital calls, if it's an anonymous number that normally I would never answer because it's somebody selling me duct cleaning, I'm going to answer the anonymous, right? Because I don't know if it's a doc or a nurse or somebody, right? So I'm like, okay, so here's the promise I got to make to you. It doesn't matter when. Like, if I have to take a call, I got to take a call, but I will show up for you, and whatever we are working on will happen. We're going to need to be creative around the time, right? So that's how I had to show up. And it was the coolest thing. Also, simplification, right? I always said, hey, these are my 4 lenses. It's got to be clear. It's got to be simple. It's got to be strategic, and it's got to be implementable, right? Those are my little 4 lenses. I got to live by them, because by necessity, things had to become even more simplified. What was on my plate really had to be on my plate. Wow. Everything else got delegated.
My own version of this story, I had earlier this year, my entire family came in, and we were going through the process of losing my grandpa to Alzheimer's.
I'm so sorry.
And thank you. And at the very midst of this, like, I was serving a new client. And it was that testament of like, hey, something has, like, life has come a knockin'. And it was that testament, and in hindsight, it was something that I saw of like, hey, this is a moment when your clients are being tested, not you. Wow. Because if I had made the decision to like work on like a YouTube video or like write a script or something, I don't think I would have been happy with that decision in the long term. I had to like be present when my presence was needed. But that, like, and thankfully, like, that client was like, I totally get it. You don't need to explain yourself. I fully understand. We still got stuff out to their YouTube channel so that the holy Google algorithm would be happy. But I see moments like that as a testament to your clients and not so much to yourself. Because if you had a client that, it's not like these things never happen. They're inevitably going to happen when you're running a business, which we assume will be for the rest of your life because we build these things to be fruitful. So if they happen and your client is like, oh, hey, I'm the most important thing in the world, then is that really a relationship you want to keep? That's my thoughts and perspectives. Back to you.
No, you're absolutely right. But that also is a testament to the type of people who are attracted to you, Ben, right?
Yeah.
And this is what I was talking about, that when you are reflecting and living by your values, they show up in different aspects of your life, including in your business. So the people who are attracted to then doing business with you, people who are attracted to be like helping support you in your work, right? Everybody, your team members, your clients, all of those guys, I truly believe that the caliber of those people is jiving with those values, right? Because if not, they quickly distance themselves because there is no resonance.
Right. That makes complete sense. And I think it's something that it's like most things in this conversation so far, it's something like, oh, it's much easier said than done. Because on my journey, it's been hard to figure out like, what is my resonance? What exactly is the frequency of my own tuning fork? Does that make sense?
It does, because like a lot of times, and this may sound funny, but a lot of times I find that we think of certain things as destinations, but they're really more of a journey, right? You're exploring, and you're also you're connecting with your own identity. if that makes any sense, right? So how could you know? And okay, so let me actually.
I think I know what you're saying, but please
Yeah.
continue talking.
So it's like this. I truly believe that who we are, the innate wisdom of this thing that's us is already there, but
Right.
we spend the rest of our life adding two different things to it, but also connecting more with it, right? And finding more about who we are and how we are showing up in this world. And that becomes a choice. It's almost like, something that's there and there's a bunch of fog and curtains around it, and you keep on peeling back the layers and finding this thing until you see it in its utter beauty. And that's, so when you're talking about your resonance, it's not that the resonance, what's there, the essence isn't there. It's just that you are exploring and finding and connecting with who that person who is Ben really is, and how does Ben want to show up in this world, and how does Ben trust who are all the people around Ben to really reveal and show who Ben is, right? And that's where you're seeing that resonance come more and more into play.
Right. The way the kind of a metaphor I use to describe it is that if you ever like held clay in your hands, a teacher described this to me before. Like we were all in our class and we were like creating like clay molds, and one person said, "I'm not quite sure what I want it to be," and she said, "Well, maybe the clay will tell you what it wants to be." And sometimes that's the case for like us as a person. Like we're being molded and we're being shaped by the world around us, but like it's not like we're being intentionally molded into something that is abstract from our resonance. We still have something that we want to be molded into. Does that make sense?
It does. Have you heard was it Michelangelo who said, somebody asked, how do you come up with all these, right? With your sculptures, how do you know? And I'm pretty sure it was Michelangelo. But anyways,
Continue.
What he said was, I don't. All I do is reveal what was already there. I just chip away the stuff that was in the way, right? That the sculpture was always there. So this is what I truly believe, that you don't need to be molded into anything else or anyone else. You're just letting the chips, fall off who you already are, right? And then trusting that it's okay to be who you are. Because a lot of times the external stuff you're talking about, that's the stuff that keeps us putting the masks in place.
Right there. That's very beautiful. I have to look up that quote later. With that being said, like the external stuff, the finding your true resonance, finding your true calling. We've had this lovely scrolling link, and for all of us watching, for all of the audio listeners, could you enlighten us as to what that is, Miss Ember?
Okay, so all the stuff that we're talking about, as I was saying to you, that there was a hesitation that, okay, well, what about all the stuff that I normally talk about, right? And as I allowed it to kind of sink in and take the shape that it just was revealing by itself, as I continued to step into it, what felt right, it was the most beautiful segue into all of the conversations about business and strategy and, the right tactics at the right time and what's really fitting for you. So one of the things that kept coming up even before all this was that sometimes we have amazing businesses and we're thinking that we're doing okay. And sometimes we don't. We are working away. And that the grind that we hear about all the time? Yeah, that I'm so not a fan. But anyway, so as we're working away, we're like, but I am working so hard. I couldn't possibly work any harder, but I'm not seeing it in my bottom line. I'm like scrunched. And that is a pet peeve of mine. So it was always about, okay, you're getting all this revenue coming in, and, marketing's favorite word, leads. We have all these leads coming in.
But and that was the magic word of the night.
Yeah, it was the magic word of the night. But it was like, okay, but why am I still struggling? Why am I still having to work so hard? And it's like, okay, let's figure out where are the leaks in your business. Is there money on the table you don't even know is there? And that became my little that wizardry kind of thing where it's like,
Yes.
hey, let's find the hidden money. And that I'm inviting people. It's completely free. Come in. And in the world that we're living in, my gift, please come. And this is a quiz that we have designed so you can go through, and it's a peek into the process that we have a 1 hour laser focused audit, which is the funniest thing because it's like, how could you possibly do an audit in an hour? But it's a laser audit that we use to find, and our goal is we're going to find minimum $100,000 in your business, as long as, of course, your business is a business and you're not just launching it.
As long as you have an actual business and not just a hobby that you put money into.
As long as you have a business, our goal is to find in that hour at least $100,000 of revenue that you did not know that you had, as available to you. So it's like what we call the hidden money. But take the quiz because it literally gives you a peek into that world and also gets you asking the right questions. So you are now privy to, hey, you know that saying that says ask the right questions and that will change your world.
Ask the right questions and get the right answers.
Absolutely. So this is literally come in. It's a cool quiz. Share your thoughts with me. You can always find me on Facebook. You can find me and message me and say, hey, Amber, this is what my thoughts is. I love to hear back from people. But yeah, it's a quiz, totally free.
Yeah, go take this quiz because I can tell you I am going to be going to take this quiz. What you're speaking about, I spoke about this in a mastermind that part of is that I find that oftentimes when we're transitioning from like the employment world to the entrepreneur world, there's a mentality of like we're not necessarily it's that emotional brain and the logical brain fighting each other. It's that like, oh, I did my job for 4 hours and therefore I get 4 hours of pay. And a lot of times we're justifying our pain with our suffering. And that this is what like really got me like thinking a lot about this topic that you're talking about, is that how many times have you been working at a job and like someone like had a long conversation about like how tired they are. Like everyone can have a long conversation about that, but also as entrepreneurs, how many times have you sat in front of the computer and clocked in hours at your business just for the sake of clocking in hours at your business so you can say you worked but not actually knowing what direction you're going? And I feel like that's sort of the same mentality of that, is that we want to justify our pay with our suffering, which is kind of messed up when you think about it. That why are we doing that? Why is it that we have this like backwards evolution mentality when it comes to our actual profitability? I feel like you got thoughts. Go ahead.
I do, because I've thought about this, right? Because I think just some of the conditioning around us is that this badge of honor that we get to wear, right? When we are grinding away and we are so busy, right? When my calendar is so full. And it's
my calendar's more full than your calendar, therefore I'm working harder.
But we actually think that in order to be successful, we have to grind away. We have to sacrifice. We have to give up on moments with people we love, and give up on and sacrifice memories that we could be making, right? We don't. We have a life, but we are only showing up in our business, right? It's that thing that I'm sacrificing myself so the people I love can have a life, right?
Right.
Oh, but that's, yeah.
Ew.
Like, no, you have a life. Go live it so that when it's your last day on this earth, you can look back. And this is my thing. I want to look back and I'm going to say, what a freaking awesome ride. I would do
Yeah.
it all over again.
We're not.
But this is, yeah.
We're a lot of times when you're on your deathbed, you're not gonna think about the cheeseburger you ate. You're gonna think about the cheeseburger you didn't eat.
True, but imagine a life where you are actually getting to live and create in a way that makes you feel like connected and aligned and fulfilled with everything you bring into this world, right? And
Right.
the point of resonance you were talking about, you're meeting people who you are resonating with because you are letting them see who you really are, right? And the fear that we have that if I'm doing this, maybe I'm not working hard enough. No, you work, and there's also the saying, work smart but not hard. No, if you have a business, you got to show up and you got to really work at certain things in order to break through certain things. But it doesn't have to be hard, and it can be fun. I choose to make it fun.
Yeah. Here's a story that I think you'll appreciate. As my audience knows, and I think you know as well, like I used to work at Target. And even when I still walk back in that building, like everyone still recognized me, like Ben, it's Ben, hello, which is very nice and warming to know. Like, oh yeah, like people still love me there. But there was a gentleman that like I was formed a like bro friendship with, and for the sake of this story, I won't include his name for reasons that you'll for reasons that you're going to find out later on in the story. Is that I was very close with this guy. Like we were in the same hiring group. We were both nerds. We like loved working with each other. We could talk up a storm. And he saw everything I was doing with entrepreneurship and how I was slowly walking out the door of Target. And he grew more and more bi-curiously. And what he wanted to do was like, hey, I'd really love to like start streaming. Like I'd love to like start streaming Pokemon stuff. Like, and believe me, I have like as many of you know, like I do trivia every single Wednesday, and streaming and setting up for that is a beast. And growing in that fashion, I'm just thinking to myself, like, this man has no idea what he's getting into when the technological things of setting up podcasts. But you know, I'll support him and I'll love him like regardless, because that's what I do. And more and more things passed. Like I left Target. We still kept in contact, and then something happened. One of our coworkers that we were both mutually friends with passed away.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And he passed away at the building too. And he was working that day, and shortly after that he quit to go and pursue his dream. And he now has his own Pokemon YouTube channel where he has tens of thousands of people following him. Because life is just too short.
And oh wow, that's some story then. But imagine, because here's the thing. We always have that choice, right? Sometimes we have these big moments that come to us as possibilities and opportunities. But sometimes we acknowledge that, oh my gosh, but then we continue on, right? And we don't reach for that dream. Like if you look at some of the stuff I had, somebody said to me, but you're in business. How can you be a dreamer? I'm totally a dreamer and I own it. Because for me, I dream big, but then I also go and pursue it with actions, right? Somebody laughed at me and were like, wait, what you're describing is it's like you translate dreams. And I said, but I kind of do, because you take a big idea, and if you don't actually bring it down into something that's achievable and you take action on it, that's all it stays. Your friend took action. He didn't just ignore that call, right? He went on and he's like, oh my gosh, this happened. I don't want that to be me. And he took action. How cool is that?
Yeah. It's first of all, that needs to be how you introduce yourself on shows now. My name's Amber and I translate dreams. Boom. There, that's your call to action now. There you go. But yes, I absolutely agree with you. It's that the way I saw it for myself, and I think that this is how my friend saw it too, is that jobs are a dime a dozen. Regardless of how the outskirts might frame it for you, you can always get another job at Target or any other place like it. But life is short, time is short, my youth is short. If it harkens back to what we talked about at the beginning of this, calling our shot. You fail, so what? I've failed at many things. That how scary is that truly? I'll tell you what's scarier. What's scarier is doing nothing for years and years, and that thought of that scary thought of what if you took the leap? What if you did that thing you always wanted to do?
Absolutely. And you know what? I'll say this, spoken like a true entrepreneur, because when you have that bug, it's like, take the leap, go after. But here's the beautiful thing about it, Ben. Jobs are a dime a dozen sometimes, right? However, if your dream is to do a particular type of a job, and that's what your dream is, go after it. Right? Yeah. But if your dream is to have a Pokemon channel and stream, flipping go after it. Don't wait.
This is why the technology's there. It's all there for you. It's never been easier, and it always gets easier. Go do it. Yeah. Amber, where can people find you?
Well, I am pretty easy to find. You can find me on Facebook. The Holistic Growth Strategies has its own website. You can drop me a note. It will come to me. If there is something that you're pursuing and you want to bring your dream into something you can actually touch people with, then share your dream with me. Drop me a note. I'm happy to hear. But yeah, you can find me on my personal profile. You can even come and join me on Conscious Business Talks, which is a show that I launched to talk about all things conscious business. And yeah, lots of places.
Awesome. You can find Amber's link down in the description. You can also find link to my challenge down there. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another fantastic episode of My Cool Friends. We'll be back next week with another very special guest. For now, I am your host, Ben Ebig, the Yoda of YouTube. This is my very special guest, Amber. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic weekend. Bye-bye, everybody.